It was a stormy night when I drove home from work. The sky was filled with dark clouds, and the wind howled as the trees swayed along the deserted road. As I finally pulled into my driveway close to midnight, the rain started pouring down heavily with thunder rumbling loudly and lightning flashing across the sky. I hurried into my house and locked the door behind me. Another awful night, I muttered to myself. The house was dark and cold. I clearly remembered leaving some lights on when I left that morning, but now everything was pitch black. Strange, but I guessed there must have been a power outage. Weird, I murmured as I fumbled on the wall for the light switch. No matter how many times I flicked it, the lights wouldn't turn on. The storm outside seemed to be getting worse, with deafening thunderclaps right by my ears. With no choice, I had to navigate the dark house by feel. I made my way to the kitchen and found a flashlight. The weak beam cut through the inky blackness like a lighthouse exploring unknown territory. Suddenly, a loud crash came from the basement, making me jump. My basement had always given me an inexplicable sense of oppression, even though nothing frightening had happened down there since I moved in. Probably something fell over down there, I tried to convince myself. But the uneasiness kept spreading in my core. Taking a deep breath to gather courage, I slowly approached the basement door with the flashlight in hand. I worried I might find signs of a break-in, but the door looked untouched, with its crooked frame still tightly shut like always. My shaky hand grasped the knob, and the door let out a creak as I pulled it open. I shone the flashlight down the stairs, peering into the dark basement. "Anyone there?" I called out loudly. My voice echoed down the stairwell, but there was no response. Heavy breathing sounds came from the basement, like some animal growling. A chill went down my spine. I gripped the flashlight tightly and strained my eyes to see better downstairs. "I know you're there," I pretended to say calmly. "Come out." The breathing stopped, replaced by heavy footsteps that seemed to walk up the stairs one step at a time. Just then, a flash of lightning lit up the top few stairs of the basement for an instant. In that split second of electric light, I saw a twisted, grotesque face staring back at me with glowing eyes. It looked like a demon that crawled straight out of hell, emanating a rotten stench. I screamed in horror, slamming the basement door shut and locking it forcefully. I bolted, running out of the house. The storm was still raging, with raindrops pounding heavily on me. Chills and terror consumed my entire body, but I kept sprinting mindlessly forward until my legs gave out, and I collapsed on the ground. After what felt like forever, I finally caught my breath again. I realized I had run several blocks and was drenched to the bone. The terrifying image was still fresh in my mind. I knew I could never go back to that house. I took out my phone but found it had been fried by the rain. Left with no choice, I went into a 24-hour diner and asked to use their phone to call the police. Soon, the police arrived at my house. To my surprise, they found nothing suspicious in the basement, no signs of any intrusion anywhere in the home. I insisted what I saw was no hallucination, so the police had forensics do an examination. However, the basement looked plain and ordinary, just like any basement should. I was baffled. I requested the police install surveillance cameras around my house in case the terrifying creature appeared again. A week went by, and the camera footage showed nothing out of the ordinary. I had to accept one fact: that night, it must have been my imagination playing tricks. From then on, I never dared to be alone in that house again, and never opened the door to the basement. But life had a funny way of making us confront our fears. A few months later, I received a call from my estranged cousin, Emma. She had been living out of state and was going to be in town for a business meeting. It had been years since we'd seen each other, and she asked if she could stay with me for a few days. I hesitated for a moment, given my recent ordeal, but eventually, I agreed. I had always been close to Emma during our childhood, and I figured her presence might help me shake off the lingering unease. When the day arrived for Emma's visit, the stormy weather seemed to have returned to taunt me. Dark clouds loomed overhead, and rain was falling steadily. As I waited for her in the living room, I tried to create a warm and welcoming atmosphere. I had even managed to find the courage to keep a few lights on. Emma's arrival brought an air of familiarity and comfort with her. We hugged and chatted about the old days as though the years of separation had never existed. I found solace in her presence, and the fear that had gripped me on that dreadful night began to recede. The storm continued to rage outside, and we decided to spend the evening playing board games. The lightning and thunder provided a dramatic backdrop, but inside, we were safe and entertained. The night seemed to be going well, and I began to think that perhaps my encounter in the basement had indeed been a figment of my imagination. As the clock approached midnight, the storm showed no signs of letting up. We decided to turn in for the night. I offered Emma the guest bedroom, assuring her it was the more comfortable option. She thanked me and headed upstairs while I retreated to my own room, hoping that tonight would be different from that nightmarish evening. I lay in bed, listening to the rain drumming on the roof. Emma's laughter from the guest bedroom brought a smile to my face. Her presence was a comforting balm to my troubled soul. I was on the verge of drifting into a peaceful slumber when a loud crash resounded from the basement. My heart raced as I remembered that night all too well. I couldn't possibly subject Emma to the same horrors. I jumped out of bed and rushed to the hallway, only to find her bedroom door wide open. The storm outside intensified, with lightning flashing like an accusing finger, revealing the empty guest room. Panic surged through me, and I raced to the basement door, praying that she hadn't gone down there. My trembling hand gripped the doorknob, and I swung the door open, casting the flashlight beam into the darkness. To my horror, I found Emma standing at the top of the stairs, her back to me, staring down into the abyss. "Emma!" I screamed. She didn't respond. It was as though she was in some kind of trance, drawn to the basement by an invisible force. "Emma, snap out of it!" I yelled, trying to break the spell. In a sudden burst of clarity, she turned to me, her eyes wide with terror. "Jack, there's something down there," she whispered, her voice quivering. Before I could react, a strange, guttural sound echoed from the depths of the basement. The same eerie breathing I had heard on that fateful night, and the same heavy, deliberate footsteps began to ascend the stairs. My heart pounded as I realized the nightmare was far from over. "Go!" I shouted at Emma, grabbing her hand and pulling her away from the basement door. We slammed it shut and locked it, the sound of the footsteps growing louder, closer. Panic washed over me, but I knew we couldn't stay there. I dragged Emma toward the front door, where the storm raged on, rain and wind lashing at us. We burst out into the tempest, sprinting through the torrential rain, my mind racing. I had no idea where we were going, but I couldn't return to that house. Emma and I finally sought shelter in a neighbor's house, where we called the police once again. This time, I feared they would dismiss our story as pure hysteria. To my surprise, they arrived promptly and took our account seriously. They inspected the basement, and this time, they found something, a hidden compartment beneath the stairs that led to a hidden chamber. In that chamber, they discovered a cache of disturbing artifacts and a makeshift altar adorned with symbols I couldn't comprehend. The police believed that someone had been using my basement for sinister rituals, perhaps even conjuring dark entities. But they couldn't find any trace of the demon-like creature I had encountered. The police eventually cleared the basement of any dangerous elements, and I had it sealed off permanently. Despite their reassurances, I could never shake the feeling that something malevolent lurked in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. Life moved on, but I could never bring myself to enter that basement again. It became a dark and forbidden place, a chapter of my life I desperately wanted to forget. The fear and uncertainty still lingered, like a haunting presence in the corners of my mind. As time passed, I found solace in the fact that the basement door remained locked and sealed, keeping whatever horrors lay beneath at bay. The stormy nights, however, continued to serve as a haunting reminder of the darkness that had once threatened to consume me.